Welcome to another episode of DioTalk. I'm Dio. Let's talk. My guest today is Faye Fulton. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Dio. How about you?
I'm good. I'm a pleasure to meet you. Finally have you here on the podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I've been doing a little bit of research on you. I checked your website, which is awesome. A couple of questions I want to ask you just to educate myself. So you're a key speaker, correct?
Yes, I'm a keynote speaker.
And a business storyteller. Am I saying that right?
Yes, I'm a keynote speaker and a business storytelling consultant.
Got it. I would love to know a little bit about what does the business storytelling consist of. It's the first time I actually heard something like that, so I'm very intrigued to see what's the concept, what's the 411.
Well, that makes me really happy that this is the first time you'll hear some information about business storytelling,
Yes,
because
yes.
it is my passion and it's an incredible communication tool.
Mm,
And that's the way you want to work with storytelling in the business arena. But I'll tell you, Dio, it's been so crazy because over the last 5 or so years,
mm-hmm.
story and storytelling have become buzzwords in business. And now everybody is talking about story. They use the word story, they talk about it, but in fact, so few people understand what story actually is. And there are very few people I come across that are using story effectively in the business world. I am just constantly amazed at what people call story.
Yes, yes.
In fact, they don't have anything that comes close to being story. They're simply calling it story.
Mm-hmm.
And that adds to this whole big confusion with what story in the business world is. There's so much misinformation. Uh, for example, here's a great example. I come across this all the time. I'll meet someone, say at a networking meeting, it's a business setting,
Yes, yes.
and they'll say, well, here's my story. I started my business 17 years ago in my garage. It was just me and my best friend, Buddy. But now we have 250 people. We have offices in Miami. We have one in San Francisco. We have one in Portland, Maine. And last year, our sales were over 6 million. But we have plans. By 2025, we're going to have an office in Australia, one in Portugal, one in Spain, and our sales are going to top 25 million.
Wow.
They call that story.
They're just stating facts.
That is nothing that comes even close to being so. People will share that with me and they're calling it story, but actually it's nothing that comes close to story. What that is a data dump, and no one is going to remember any of those numbers, any of those facts. And that's one of the reasons that I love what I do, because when I am in front of a large group of people keynoting, or when I'm working one-on-one with my clients, I always have an educational component to my work. I need to educate them on what business story is and how to work with business story. I work with a lot of people that are pretty high up, CEOs, vice presidents, and they'll come to me and they'll say, look, I'm going to give this presentation. My team has told me I need a story. And then the next
Yeah.
thing they say is, but I don't want to tell a story. Story is nothing but fluff. I want to share all my numbers, all my statistics, all my facts. And I just start to educate them right away. Because in fact, the story is much more important than all those numbers and data, because numbers and data can only be understood in context. So you give your audience or your listeners a story, and then all those numbers, if you share any, make sense to us little
Yes.
peons who are listening. The story is much more important than all those numbers. But again, no one's going to remember any of those numbers. They
Yes.
just, fly right over, we hear them, but we don't digest them. We're not going to remember them.
Yeah, so it'll give the story helps to give you a better presentation, a more memorable presentation, rather than I'm letting you know all the facts about my company, but that's about it.
Oh, yeah, no one will remember that. But we humans, we remember story. And there's so much neurological, scientific data on that. The human brain thinks in a story structure. So all the data we take it in through our senses, through our eyes, through our ears, through our smell. But then the brain puts all that information into a story format, and that's how we understand. So when you think about it, we remember stories, and that's one of the reasons, the neuroscience, how the brain actually works. But another really powerful, strong reason to work with stories in the business world is because stories are co created. And that's another reason we remember stories. While I am telling you a story, you're going to be creating an image of that inside your brain. The brain works in
Yes.
images. And because you're part of the creator, you're going to remember it. And that's why us humans, we remember stories. We're not going to remember the numbers or the data. Um, all right, let me share an example with you. So
Okay.
what if I said this to you? What if I said she put on her emerald green dress, stepped into her black stiletto heels, selected the perfect hat for the occasion, strapped the kids into the backseat of the car, and drove off toward downtown? Now, when you were listening, you weren't just sitting there. You were creating an image of this woman
Yes.
inside of your head.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
This is one of the things I love about storytelling. When I share this and explain it, everybody's like, oh my God, that's right. Yes, story is really powerful. All right, so let me ask you this. When you were listening, what kind of hat did you see on that woman's head?
One of these fancy hats, like summer hats on them. That's like it's big and round. Like
Okay,
one of
so
those. Yeah.
like a big brimmed hat.
Yes. Yes.
And no, in fact, that's not what I was talking about, because that woman had a Christmas hat on her head.
Wow.
She was taking her daughters to downtown to see the Christmas lights that day. But the thing is, your story will never match my story because you'll have your own unique image of it in your head. I'll have a different image of it. Um, Here's another example. Have you ever read a book
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe a month later you go to see the movie
There's
and the
nothing
movie
alike.
starts to roll and you're like, that's not what the main woman looks like. Oh, she's a
Yeah.
blonde.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
do that all the time.
Yes. Yes.
But that's why we remember story. So it's an incredibly powerful tool. If you've got a
Yes.
message, you want people to remember what you've said. And that's the mark of a really great story.
Wow. That's amazing.
It really is. It's fascinating.
Like so when you like one of your clients approach you, like do they give you certain information or do you ask them certain information on, all right, I need this and this? You have particular questions to ask them in order to create this story dialogue for them.
Well, it's always different. And that I love. Everyone is always different. Their needs are always different. And I have a lot of people that I work with, and they'll say, okay, my team told me I have to tell a story. So I need a story, but I don't have any stories. I don't have any. And of course, we all have stories. But I understand that because to you, you lived through it. To you, it was just life. It doesn't feel like a story to you.
Yes.
So, very often, I have exercises that I go through with my clients so they can bring their stories to the forefront of their mind. Because the stories we work with in the business world are true stories. I won't work with anyone who says, well, I'm going to make this story up. No, this is one of the reasons you want to use story in the business world. It's to help convey to the people that you work with, to potential clients, to customers, investors, what type of person you are. That's one way to use story. And so the stories have got to be real stories, and they're about the kind of person you are. But there are different types of stories to use in the business world. But yes, very often we really have to dig. It's got to be a true story. So the journey is one that right now in my life, I feel like I've come full circle almost. And what I mean is I got started with storytelling very, very early in my life. And then my career, it's always been in communication. But over the last 6 years, I've niched that. So the only kind of communication that I talk about as a keynote speaker or work with my clients today is business storytelling. So that's it. I've niched it down. That's what
Yes.
I'm known for. But starting really, really early, I've always been fascinated with story. I had a fabulous childhood. In fact, I wouldn't trade my childhood with any other person on earth. I grew up in Italy.
Wow.
I know. You
Wow.
know, it was just, oh my gosh, I took it all in. I just loved it. So my father got this huge promotion. He was a big wig in the corporate world. Well, why wouldn't we move? He got a fabulous opportunity for his career. And that's what's brought us to Italy. And I got to Italy before I was 6 years old. And that's when you really go out in the world. When you're a kid, you're in your parents' home, their
Yes.
home. That's about it. So I don't remember much of anything when we lived here. It was when I got to Italy, and that's when I got out in the world. And of course, the Italy back then is very different than the Italy of today. Have you been? Have you ever been
No,
to?
I have not have one day. Hopefully soon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I'm certainly biased. Yeah, but fabulous people, fabulous food, fabulous culture. I mean, come on, the Italians. But anyway, growing up, well, have you been to Europe?
No, the most I've been is Puerto Rico, which I grew up, a place I grew up in, and that's about it. I haven't traveled
Oh,
that much.
oh, my favorite is Old San Juan. The history
Yes.
of those buildings, it's so beautiful. Well, in most major cities in Europe, all throughout Europe, people live in high-rise apartment buildings, and we did too. I lived in a neighborhood with 3 high-rise apartment buildings. The whole thing was gated. We had this enormous park, but I was a tomboy. And back then, there were very, very few Americans who lived in Italy. So when I moved into the neighborhood, I was always outside. I met my neighbors and my friends immediately because I was a tomboy. I was out there playing. And word spread like wildfire. There's an American girl in the neighborhood.
Mm,
How I got interested in story was one of my neighbors, and she actually lived on the 3rd floor. We had the penthouse, we were way up high, but she lived on the 3rd floor. And she was actually my second family. I grew up with 2 families, my American family, and then my other family was actually just one woman, and she was a retired opera singer. She was a very
wow.
famous opera singer in Europe, and she was also a contessa. Now, when I met her, she had been retired for a few years and she was approaching 70 at a gallop. But when she retired, she acquired that disease called agoraphobia. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't go outside, you stay inside.
Mm-hmm.
You just have this fear of going outside. And so she was very often on her balcony, but she never left her apartment. And that's how we met. She heard that there was this new American girl. She heard people talking about me. So she was out on her balcony one day and she called me over and she said, I want to meet you. Come up to my apartment. And after that, we just developed this incredible, really special relationship.
Wow.
She had never had children, but she treated me like I was her daughter. And because she never left her apartment, well, all of her friends came to visit her. Well, all of her friends were these famous performers too,
Wow.
dancers, choreographers, singers, and they were people from all different countries speaking all different languages. These people were sensational storytellers. And that's how I got interested in story way back when. And
Wow.
it was incredible. So I got to listen to all these different languages, all these different cultures, these people from all these different religions. They were all telling these amazing stories. But then to compound that, so we were always telling stories when I was with the Contessa. But back then, my father would save up his vacation time every 2 years. And when he did that, we would have the whole summer to vacation. And so we would leave Italy, we'd go to the United States to visit my grandparents. And, my grandparents knew me when I was an infant, but I didn't remember any of that. So actually, I remember meeting my grandparents when I was 8 years old, and we
Okay.
stayed in their house for a month and a half, and then we went to my other grandparents, and they lived in a different state. But my mother's parents, um, big Texans,
Mm,
and they lived right on the Gulf of Mexico. And when I was 8, I met my grandfather, and he was retired by then. And what he did all day long was he wrote stories. And it was so amazing to me because no one else in my family was creative. I was the only one. And I didn't even think I had relatives that were creative. And here was my grandfather. And he would walk around with one of those pads that had the spiral at the top
yes, yes.
all day long. And he wrote his stories. But his stories were so different than the stories we told in Italy because his stories had a special little vent to it. His stories had to rhyme.
Oh,
So I
that's
called my,
interesting.
it was so different. I called my grandfather Papa, and Papa and I would spend hours together rhyming his stories. And then every night after we ate dinner, we'd still be around the dining table, and Papa would tell us the story he had written that day. And most of them were absolutely hilarious. He was such a great story writer and storyteller. So that's how I actually started my journey with story. It's like always been with me,
Wow.
but now I get to do this for my living. And I just have such tremendous passion for it. And I love being able to open up people's eyes like you. Well, I haven't even
Yes.
heard about business storytelling. What is this about? What?
No, I've in college they will teach you about speech, and they'll put like TED Talks in and give you certain examples of important speech throughout history. But like I've never heard that like a story of a business, like that you emphasize so much. I've never, I found it now fascinating, because I can imagine how many entrepreneurs you help put words together, and they just get popular because their story is so amazing.
Well, it takes a lot of skills to be a good storyteller. It's one of the big challenges because, well, say for instance, you can write a story,
Yes.
but when you get up to tell it, if you're a bad presenter, it's going to fall
Mm,
flat on its face.
yes, yes.
It takes a heck of a lot of skill, and I love that challenge. But something else about the neuroscience is the brain is always looking for something unique or something new. And that's when we really like take notice. Oh, I've never heard that before. I've never heard it stated in that particular way, or I never thought about that before. So that's one of the challenges also that a storyteller is up against. You're going to have to be an incredible writer. You need to have precise language and wonderful phrasing because you've got to keep those people with you
Yes, and
from the very
yeah,
beginning all the way through the end of your story.
it's like an emotional roller coaster. You got to keep them on their toes.
I am so glad you used that word, Dio,
Yes.
because it's a major component of story. Emotion. All these people that call anything a story, one of the things they're truly lacking is emotion. That has to be part of a story. And, as we were talking just a few minutes ago, we make decisions based on our emotions, and then we justify the decisions later.
Yes, that is 100% correct.
Yeah. And so if you cannot connect with your audience on an emotional level as well as an intellectual level, then you are not a storyteller. You're a lecturer. And there are huge differences.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's one of the things I love about story. It takes a heck of a lot of skills. And those skills need to be on the same level. But I'll tell you, People are just so confused. Like when I give a keynote speech, I speak in front of large groups of people. So there might be 500, 800 people in the room. And when I work one on one with my clients, at the beginning, I'll throw it out there. Someone, please share a definition of storytelling with me. Give me the definition of story. And 9 times out of 10, the definition I always hear is this one. All right, story. Story has a beginning, a middle, and an
And
end.
the most common one. Yes, yeah.
Yes, it does. But that doesn't help us at all to understand story. I mean, even a cockroach and Thanksgiving dinner has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But this is what I mean. So
Yes.
many people are just confused about story. But I understand that confusion. I truly do. Because most of us, we start learning about story when we're really tiny. Our parents would read us to sleep by telling us or reading a story.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that's very true.
yeah, so because story has been our lives almost from the beginning, most people think they understand story. They think they know story until they try to write one. And then they realize they're in over their head and like, oh, I don't really know what to do. But it's one of those things that we feel really familiar with. And I know that that adds to the confusion for most people. It's just something we're really close to.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to brass tacks, I really don't know what to do.
Yeah. Would you say that that's almost like a lost art, storytelling? Because like I must repeat, like in school, they'll teach you, just give me, direct information. No need, don't so much detail. But that's one of the most important components of storytelling is the description, the detail within the story that makes it valuable.
So true. I mean, you are hitting it on the nail. Now, remember, you're the storyteller. And what you have to do is get all those people listening to your story, creating a very clear visual inside of their head. So, yes, the details are exceedingly important. But what I find most people do is they go way overboard with the details. Well, if you
Mm,
give anyone too much of anything, there's going to be nothing but confusion.
yes, yes,
But people are so
that's
tempted
very
when
true.
they're trying to write a story to include everything but the kitchen sink. And it's a big mistake because the human mind can't
Mm.
handle that much at one time.
It has to be important details that matter. You don't want to
Bingo.
over flood it with details that the curtain is red, but there was no reason that you have to say the curtain is red. It's not within the story realm.
Bingo. Yes. You include those important details and those details that will help them create that specific image in their mind. Yeah. But they've got to be there, the details, because it's one of the ways we're going to keep them with us. The brain will be interested in hearing.
Yes, yes. Do you often get confused with motivational speakers? Because it's the difference. Like
It,
what we have said so far, it's a big difference. Obviously, one is more passionate and detail oriented than the other.
there's a huge difference, yes. And actually, I just have to smile when I hear the words motivational speaker because the fact is, there's no such thing.
Mm,
And the reason is motivation comes from within. What I could do as a speaker is inspire you, but only you can motivate yourself to do something, to take action. So actually,
yes.
it's a misnomer when I hear motivational speaker, but I'm known as what is called an educational speaker
Mm,
because, like I shared with you, I've just niched it down. The only thing I talk about now is business storytelling. So when I'm a keynote at a conference people have gone to, they're going to leave my speech knowing a lot about business storytelling. Now, whether or not those people take action with the information I've given them, it's 100% up to them. But they will understand story when they leave my speech because I'm an educational speaker. Yeah. But you're right. There are many different types of speakers,
Yeah.
but there's really no such thing as a motivational speaker.
Yes,
It's
that's why I was very when we first started. I was very I didn't want to say you were a motivated speaker because like I said, I went through your website and like it called my attention because
yay.
it's a lot of people will say, yeah, I'm a motivational speaker, but as I read the paragraphs you have written on the website, it's like it's totally different. And that's my first question because I think it's very important. Like for me, like I started my own brand, right? Dream, inspire, obtain, and I'm an individual that I don't know how to talk about myself. I don't know how to tell you my story. I don't. I just don't know how. I guess growing up, I grew up in an environment that wasn't always about me. It was
Mhm.
about my surroundings. So it's difficult for me. So like when somebody asks me, "What does dream, inspire, obtain mean?" I'm like, "Dreamer inspire other dreamers to obtain their goal." But it's so much more than that. I sometimes I get so frustrated on explaining what it is when I don't have the right words to explain. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. You are like the clients I work with all the time. But it takes a really strong team. And that's one of the reasons I love what I do is because I know I truly help those people. They come to me with a need. Look, I'm giving a presentation to my team, to my investors. I need a story. Well, that person has a different skill set. And that's what makes my heart sing because I can help them with my skill set. That person might be the CEO. He might have an MBA. He might know all about investing and crunching numbers. That's so boring to me. And I don't know any of that. I have to
Yes,
hire a
yes.
CPA to help me. But they don't know how to communicate what they need to get across. And that's where my skill set comes in. So, us working together, we're going to come up with a fantastic story. I'm there to help them to do that. And have you ever listened to someone telling a story and you're thinking, what is the point? That person's just rattling on and on. It's like, oh my God, what are they talking about?
You lose,
You know,
yeah, you lose interested because it sounds as rather than tell a story or talk, it sounds like they're going on a rant.
yeah. And just like that example I shared with you a few minutes ago when I
Yes.
said she put on her emerald green dress, stepped into her black stiletto heels, selected the perfect hat for the occasion, people will call that story. That's not anywhere near being story. So I want to be clear for you and all your listeners, that was not story. Because what I shared with you was simply a series of events, and that's it. Now, that series of events could be developed into story, but it's going to take a heck of a lot of work before you ever reach story.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, like I said, it just amazes me what people are calling story. Have you ever gone to a networking meeting and they'll say, okay, we're going to go around the room. There's 35 people.
Hmm.
You have a minute and a half to tell your story. Well, there is no way on God's earth. And who is going to remember that? You stand up, you have time to tell them your name, maybe your title. That's it.
And if that,
But they're calling it story. It's like I understand why people are so confused. But then when they start to learn about story, it's a sensational communication tool. But another thing that's so confusing in the business world is people are trying to use story as a sales tool.
yes,
That is not the way to use story. And you won't be successful because it's still going to be a sales pitch and you try to wrap it up in a story. But when people are trying to sell you something, you get that icky feelings like, I'm in the middle of a sales pitch. No, storytelling is a communication tool, and that's the way to work with it. But unfortunately, the marketing world has been trying to force story into a sales tool, and it's just not working because that's not the way to use stories.
yeah, they're trying to almost uh the consumer, make the consumer feel as they need to empathize or feel something, be moving, so they can purchase whatever they're trying to sell.
But it's still sales, isn't it? It
Yes.
still feels yucky.
If you got to buy something, it still sells.
Yeah. Now, now there are certain types of stories to tell in the business world, but selling is not one of them. And telling a business story is exceedingly different from telling a story for sheer entertainment purposes. You've got to work with business story strategically. And there's a reason you're telling that story. Because I do the storytelling for entertainment purposes too.
Mhm.
But it's a very different type of story. And you're in a very different arena. Yeah.
Yes, yes. When your clients approach you, do they like, I want to use this story or this information, right? And have you often found yourself telling them we can't use that? It's not factual. We need more in depth.
Right. Well, usually what they want to share is, again, nothing that could be ever categorized as
Mm.
story. So we have to find a story. And like I said, a true story about them.
So do you go up to like the founder of the company, because to find a realistic story like that, you will have to go to the origins of it, for it can make
Definitely.
sense.
Definitely. Well, you think about the business world today, it's so different from other generations.
Mhm.
And people don't want to be sold to. Today, it's not about closing a sale, it's about opening a relationship. Because in business today, we do business with people we know, like, and trust. That's what storytelling will do for you.
Wow.
I mean, if you have ever gone into any kind of situation and someone walks in and says, you know what, I am the most honest person walking the face of the earth, no one's going to believe you. You're not going to believe that. But if you could share a story that indicates something that you did in the past
Show your values.
and shows you're an honest person, people will remember it. And that is what we want to know. What kind of person are you? Are you a person who keeps their word? Are you an honest person? Are you trustworthy? Facts, numbers, and statistics can never communicate that. What can? An excellent story. Here's an example. One of the stories that you want to share in the business arena are what I call beginning stories. And the beginning story is a story about you as a child growing up. That growing up period, that's when we learn all of our life lessons, all our values. And by telling that kind of story, you can indicate what kind of person you are. Say, for example, you and your brother loved to play baseball when you were growing up, and you had a neighborhood team. You go out on a big field, and everyone played on that field every day after school. Well, say one of the kids hit the ball one day, the ball flew over and went through the window of a neighbor, broke the window's glass. All the kids left the baseball field except you. You go over and knock on that neighbor's door and you say, I'm so sorry. Can I have our ball back? And I will pay to have your window replaced. That kind of thing. No one has to be told, look, I am an honest person.
Mhm.
You share the story and they completely understand.
Yeah, I
But
totally.
now that person is thinking, oh my gosh, this is someone I
Yeah.
will work with.
I totally understand the concept. I do. Like now, and this time frame, this generation, a lot of people try to sell themselves rather than, almost just prove themselves. Only time can tell what kind of person you are, or just share a meaningful, heartwarming story like you shared. Um, a lot of it's a lot of trust me, rather than get to know me, or that time tell who the type of person I am.
Exactly. So that kind of beginning story is so valuable in the workplace. You know, part of story is some kind of problem or dilemma or confrontation. Well, how you handle that problem makes you the kind of person you are. You're the one who went over to the neighbor. You're shaking in your boots like, I'm so sorry. I know you are angry. We broke your window, but I am going to get a job after school and I'll pay for this window. Can I have my ball back? You're the
Yes,
person who
yes,
did that. It speaks
yes,
volume about you. All those values that your parents tried to instill in you. Well, some people get them, but some people don't. Yeah, but those
yeah.
values, they stick with us our whole life. That's the kind of person you are.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. I can imagine there's has to been moments that you made like certain individual cry because you asked them to go in depth, and because as time, because as I want to say, as successful an individual goes, they forget they forget their values. They forget how hard was it to start, and how they're so far in that level that they don't remember. So I can imagine you've sat down and have people just think, and sometimes just break down because those are not easy memories.
it's so true. Some of those lessons we learn, they're really hard lessons.
Yes.
And that's why they get in us and they stay in us. They're hard. But but you're right. I do have quite a few stories that will bring people to tears, and every one of them is a true story. I don't know why this has happened to me in my life, but I've almost lost my life 12 different times
Wow.
in very, very different ways. And those stories, they tend to bring people to tears. But I will tell you, we all have hardships. We all have
Yes,
things we
yes.
have to get past and deal with. But those are the stories that usually people start to cry. They're like, "Look, I can't believe you're still with us."
Yes.
And sometimes I think that. I think, especially the last one. I was sure that would be the one that would get me, but I'm still here. So I know that there's a reason I'm still here. Not sure what it is. I'm sorry, this is my baby. This is Sophia.
Hi, Sophia, little cutie.
She is a love. Yeah. So yes, I have in my personal arsenal, because once you become a storyteller, you're going to need quite a few different stories. Well, like anything else, people don't want to hear the same story over and over. It's going to lose its impact because they know the story.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
correct.
The best time to hear a story is the first time.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
so you need not just one story. You need different types of stories, but you need to keep them fresh, because what a storyteller has to do is get their listeners curious, because you need your listeners to be thinking, what happens next? You got to keep them with you.
yes. Intrigued.
Yes. And that's where your writing and your telling skills come in. They're two really different skill sets. Your vocabulary, it's a very important skill for a storyteller. Again, those words that will keep your listener going, oh, I haven't heard that word in 2 decades. Good word. Keep them really interested. There's so many ways you can do that, but they require all those different skills. Yeah.
Yes. Something that I can imagine throughout years you just get better at if you keep, constant doing it. Just do it.
Like any skill, the more you do it, the better you get at it. Yeah. Yeah. So you keep that skill honed, which of course is what I do because I work with story every day.
Yes.
Um, like any other skill, you hone it, you will be good.
Have you ever thought about just publishing a book of stories, or just writing anything like a memoir, or I'll tell you this much: if you ever write a book of storytelling business, it'll be very useful. It'll be a number one seller in this corporate world because they need more of that.
You are so dear. Thank you for saying that.
I worked at I'm not gonna say a place, but I worked at this corporation, and every year they would invest in motivational books and to help their employees and whatnot get inspired. and whatnot. And you know what, the storytelling business, I think it will be more productive than actually having somebody to tell you, you got to get up, you got to do it. There's but that's what it is
Oh,
nowadays.
yeah, because they're learning a new skill, and that skill is going to stay with them. I think it's much more valuable than listening to some kind of self-help or motivational speech. But again, I'm biased. This is what I do.
Yes, yes, yes.
But what makes such a big difference to me is this is going to have to be something you do. You're going to have to do all the work because you have to develop those skills. I mean, you can listen to my stories all evening long, but just listening to my stories isn't going to help you. We get to work. These are the skills you're going to have to develop. We get to work and we start working on story. But I love it. I love the journey.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and like I said, once I start educating the people I work with, their eyes are just open. But now, see, this is one of the reasons that I know I help them, Dio. Now they have a new set of skills. They have a new tool, and it's the communication skills because there are actually very few people who are good communicators.
Mm,
Most people are not strong in that area, but
yes.
it's an incredible skill set to be really a good communicator. Working on story will do that for you.
I can
Yeah.
imagine if you like ever do like a workshop of writers, just general writers about stories, sports, you inspire so much because like in this generation, there's something that's called a lot of writer's block. I'm not sorry if I'm saying it correct, but it's like I've throughout the years I've heard it increase and more and more and more. I can't write, I'm blocked, but yet just hearing you and how you explain it and the essence of it, you like the cure for writer's block.
Oh, that is so dear. Thank you for saying that. And just to let you know, I am a published author. So I have,
Yes.
oh, yes, I have a book that I've written, a book of stories. And they're all stories of when I grew up in Italy.
Wow, I need
So,
to read this book.
oh, you're so dear. So I actually grew up in the Mafia capital of the world.
Yes,
I
yes.
grew up
La
in
Cosa
Palermo,
Nostra.
Sicily. Yes, in
Yes.
Palermo, Sicily. And while I was there in Palermo, I almost lost my life 3 times because of the mafia.
Oh,
Now, it's not like that today. Italy of today is very different. They were in our face back then.
yes,
So
yes.
my book is called Sicilian Stories Living Just Off the Toe of Italy's Boot. But
Wow.
they're all stories about me growing up. There's a story about the Contessa.
I'm
She
definitely gonna seek that. I'm fascinated with, I don't want to say obsessed, it's too much, but I'm fascinated with this whole Cosa Nostra mom mentality. I'm for some reason it calls my attention. I don't know why. I just don't know why.
well,
But
I
yes,
will tell you, I'm in a lot of storytelling slams.
mm,
So it's a competition, of course. There's going to be a
yes,
winner. Um, and I do believe that that gives me a leg up
I
because
can
I haven't
imagine.
met another storyteller who has stories about the mafia. And I agree, it
Well, how
gets
could they?
people's
You're right there.
attention.
You were right there in the almost in the Mecca. And the Mecca, like how who would top that? No one.
Well, I haven't met anyone else who grew up in Palermo.
That's
Uh,
so beautiful.
So it does give me a leg up. Yeah. And I like that leg up
Yes.
because I get tired like anyone else of hearing the same kind of stories over and over. So yeah, it's been really fun.
Wow. Ah,
Oh, like I said, I wouldn't trade my childhood with anyone else's.
no. No. No, no, no. Wow. That
It,
must have been a crazy
oh,
time. You met you've had like an extraordinary childhood, from famous opera singers. They this, because people love the opera when they're over there. They go there, they want to live that lifestyle. And I can imagine you had Incredible, incredible.
Well, I'll tell you, I still miss the Contessa. I have never met any other person like her. She was so full of life. And the Contessa is the person who taught me about life.
Yes.
She's the one who gave me all my values. And please don't get me wrong, I love my parents.
Your second mom. Yeah.
Definitely. But they were just really different type of people. They were so American. And what I'm saying is my mother wasn't one of those lovey-dovey feeling mothers. She was rather distant. I don't ever remember my parents hugging me. And when I would ask them a question, I was a curious kid. I'm still really curious. I would ask my parents a question, and their answer would be, because I said so. Now, when I asked the Contessa a question, if it took her an hour to answer, she would sit down and take an hour to answer. But she taught me about music, about life, about color, about architecture. She taught me how to cook. She had all of this going on herself. She was just amazing.
I can
And I
imagine
still
for
miss her.
a woman that she was scared to leave her house. I mean, there's a reason why she was scared to leave her house. Life, so much cooped
Yeah.
up in one person. Like she can, give so much knowledge about life and teach.
Well, she had only one reason would make her leave her home. And that was to say goodbye. And what I mean is she would go to her friends' funerals.
Mm.
That is the only way she would step out of the house to say goodbye. And the day that my family and I left Sicily, my father got another big promotion, and we moved from Sicily to Trinidad, a completely different part of the world. The airport was about a 2.5 hour drive from where we lived, and I did not want to leave. And the major reason was I didn't want to leave the Contessa. I mean, I knew she was so special to me. I couldn't imagine life without her, and I did not want to leave. But we drove to the airport. I walked into the airport, and who was there? The Contessa. She came out to say goodbye to me. And I can't even tell you. I knew how difficult it was for her to walk out her front door, but she did it for me.
Wow.
She was amazing. Just incredible.
I can
But
imagine how difficult that felt, and just to think about it.
oh, I tears. I couldn't believe she left her apartment for me. I just couldn't believe it. But that's how I got interest in story. So
Wow.
it's from, I was this tall and I start learning about story from fabulous instructors. Yeah, it was just amazing.
And opera, right? They sing, and they're almost storytelling as well.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, it's not.
Music is so important to Italians.
Yes.
Food is so important. Their culture, they're so proud. Oh, it's just fascinating. And like I said, don't get me wrong, I love my parents. They were just different kind of people. But I had two families,
Yes.
and I'm so grateful for it.
No, you were very fortunate enough to, I say all the time, when you're a child, you got to grow up to be the person you needed to be as a child, and you had that. You had your family, but yet you had someone there that you needed them to be there for you. And
Yeah.
it was,
And I think everyone needs mentors.
yes.
I hope everyone has a mentor. I think they're so important.
I've I have no luck. I have no luck. I have no luck. I don't know what is having a mentor is. It's I tell my wife all the time. It's been difficult growing up in my surroundings, and doing everything myself, solo, and to have somebody mentor me on life. When majority of my life I've done alone, it's very difficult for me. You know,
It just makes all the difference in the world. You know that old saying, to know the road ahead, ask someone coming back,
yes,
someone who's already been there.
yes,
Yeah, we need
yes,
mentors.
yes.
And I'm so fortunate because now I am a mentor, and I have been for some time. You pass it forward.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I grew up in a bar in Puerto Rico, and just like you, I used to hear a lot of stories. Especially when somebody's it's tipsy and under the influence of alcohol, they talk a lot. So, if that's a form of mentoring, because, I learned a lot of what not to do, which, I don't drink, I don't use any drugs or substance, because of that surrounding and those, quote unquote mentors.
But how valuable were those lessons, Dio? I mean, you
Yes,
learned what you did not want to do,
yes,
and learning
yes,
it so early, what a gift. It
yes,
really
yes,
was a gift when you look back. We don't recognize what's happening when we're kids, but looking back, you're like, wow, that really opened my eyes. A gift, a gift. Yeah.
yes.
And I bet it was fascinating growing up in a
Yes, yes.
bar.
I met a lot of, I grew up with my grandparents, so they, I was, Domino's,
Oh, sure.
the game.
Yeah.
So, my grandfather, he owned a store. One half of the store, he would have like domino tournaments, and I used to sit next to him, and I used to, hear different stories about when they were growing up, and how we do pranks, and how describing what, how was that time back then, and what were some of the difficulties and challenges and whatnot. So, I sometimes I wish I can just go back. Some I feel like because I was so young, I was a child, like you, 6, 7 years old. I feel like sometimes I took that for granted because there is so much knowledge, just, and then it was an organic conversation. They were just talking, and everything was so flowing.
Yes. And I bet it was just fascinating
Yes,
listening to
yes,
them.
yes.
Me too. As a kid, I was just so fascinated. You learn
Intrigued.
you learn so much just by listening. And that's a huge part of being a good communicator. Most people are very poor listeners, but it's a
Yes.
huge component. Yeah.
I try to go by what's the quote? Speak once and listen twice.
Ah, that's really good advice, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes,
That's a
yes,
good one to remember.
yes. It's very important. You never just, in today's society with a lot of mental health, it's important to listen, because you never know who's going through something. Sometimes majority of the youth nowadays just need somebody to listen.
Oh, it's so wonderful when you can find someone who will listen, because I think most conversations are just alternating monologues. Is there anyone out there who's really listening? It's just people are just waiting for their turn to speak,
Yes.
but they're not really listening and taking in what the other person has
Yes,
shared.
and they're antsy and it's just about to
Yeah.
outspurt whatever they have in their mind, because they just want to get it out there. That's one of the things I growing up. There was radio, not much TV, radio. So that's why I got into podcasting. I just remember just listening, rather than watching, and just enjoying it, hearing stories on the radio, or just uh, me interviews or conversations. I tend to enjoy it because I was listening to them, and I could do 20 minute things while I'm listening, right? Rather than sit at one place and watch something. Uh,
And while you were listening, you were creating all of those images in your head
yes, yes,
that made it so special for you.
yes,
And that's why you can still remember it now that you're an adult. It happened years ago.
yes,
The
yes,
co-creation of story, such a powerful thing.
yes, yes. Very important. Very important.
So that's one of the things. If you want people to remember what you say, tell them a great story and they will remember.
And have that sense of how do I say, the delivery, like how you deliver the message and the story. It's very important.
Oh,
And within documentaries and movies, always been fascinated with that aspect. It's, like you said, there's there's so constructed. There's so many parts of it telling a story, but one of the most important parts is delivering it.
oh yes. Well, the fact is there are four types of languages. Four types of language, but most people only deal on one type. So the four types of language are vocal, verbal, physical, and emotional. If you are someone who can bring all of those to the table and you're very good at them, you will be an outstanding communicator. Because most people just stick on the verbal level of language, which is the actual words. But there's
Mhm.
so much more to it. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's
Like,
fascinating.
what was your first time? Like, how was your first time? What did you feel when the first time you gave a storytelling seminar, or were you in like in school? Like, how describe it to me? Like, how was it?
Well, it was fabulous because,
Yes.
again, when I share the information and people start working on their skills, that the light bulbs always go off. You're like, oh my gosh, now I understand. And yes, I do give a lot of workshops. I'll go into corporations. They hire me. I need you to train my team, my whole team. We need to be using storytelling. So I usually have a group, and I just love it. I love when everything starts to click. I love seeing how nervous they are the first time they get up in front of everyone and tell their story, and then the progress they make. And before I leave, we might have a workshop might be 5 days in a row, but when I leave, I can see how they've progressed and improved their storytelling. So it fills my heart. But that's what I meant, Dio. I absolutely know that I help people, and that's what makes the difference. It makes the difference. Yeah. So it's a fabulous journey for me.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. What is that quote? Work a day in your life doing something you love. You never worked again, something like that.
Yeah,
I'm botching. I apologize.
it's not work. If you're doing
Yeah,
something you love, it's not even work.
correct, correct.
But again, growing up in Italy, I feel so fortunate because I was exposed to languages. Right
Do
now,
you speak? Are you fluent in Italian?
I speak three languages.
Wow.
Yes. So language has always been something that truly interests me. And some words can simply not be translated. There are some words Italians use, there is no equivalent to English in English. And the same thing with the French. There are words that they understand. We words language has always been fascinating to me. And I get to deal with it when I'm working on story. So yeah,
It's
it's
good to it's
it's
good to
great.
speak to people like you who are passionate about what they do, and just finding that there's so much lack. Like, I don't understand if it's the times we're in, but like lack that passion. Yeah, everybody's doing a blog or YouTube, but it's they are doing it to monetize, to make money out of it. But there's no lack of passion. Like when you speak from the moment you started to now, I was intrigued and fascinated. You got me locked down. All I want to do is listen to you,
Oh, that's
right?
so good to hear. But the
And
thing is, you speak from the heart,
yes,
and it comes from the heart. And just like you said, if you're involved in something you love, it's not work. But then, when I walk away from the training, when I leave the stage after giving a keynote speech, I know I have helped them. And that's so important to me. I think that might be why I'm still here.
yes,
There is a way that I can help other people,
yes,
and it's
yes,
my communication skills, which most people just take for granted.
yes. This how do I say it? Like in the beginning of the pandemic, middle, can't remember. I walked away from a high paying corporation. I felt like I would so many years just burned out, that I was eager to feel this feeling when I hear you talk of inspiration, of just do something you love, right? And like, I'm hearing you speak, and you're just giving me flashback of reassuring me why I made the difficult decision of leaving, and embarking in something I have no regard. I didn't know what world was it. I didn't know how to start it. I didn't know how to develop it, or describe it. But I know this feeling, and the feeling when I hear hear you speak, and with your amazing words. You know, you remind me of that feeling that I want so much, and it's passion about doing something you love. And that's clearly what you've been doing all these years.
Oh yeah,
And we need so much of people like you in this world right now. And I mean that.
and aren't you much happier leaving the corporate world?
Yes. I mean, it's
Because
financially, it's, you know, let's say rent got to get paid, but you have no idea how grateful I have an autistic son, right? And this has been the most time since he was 2 uh I have spent with him and gotten to know with him.
a gift,
Yes,
time,
yes, yes,
time together is a gift.
yes,
Yeah, there's always going to be struggles, but when
yes,
you're involved in something you have such passion for, it makes the journey so much more valuable. We're on this planet for really a short time. We need to
yes,
enjoy what we're doing. And I'm like you, I started out in the corporate world. Oh, not a good fit. It was never a good fit for me. I'm so much happier outside of the corporate world. Yeah.
that's how I feel. It's I got to I got to a little bit got more closer with my wife, got to finally be a dad, right? Because working in these corporate roles, they're so time consuming. I
It's
remember
exhausting.
yes, I remember a time I would wake up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I didn't come home until 6 p.m. or 10 p.m. And when I come home, they're still calling me.
And by then, your baby's asleep. You still don't
Yes,
see him.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, life is all about choices. What's more important? Some of those choices are really hard to make.
yes,
Yeah. And
yes,
coming to that juncture, making that decision, I'm going to spend more time with my family. That could be developed into a great story
yes.
about the kind of person you are.
Oh, yeah,
Great story to share,
yes,
because that was a dilemma. You were at a crossroads, a junction. What do I do? But that's what
yeah,
we've been talking about today, isn't it? Yeah.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Very, very mind-boggling, very, very shocking. It's so important. You know, I can't break the thought, because like I said, I started reading it, and I got so intrigued about storytelling, but yet all you have said and broke down, and it's so important. It's so important. It's so important for like right now that small businesses are picking up through the because of the pandemic. These they need people like you that to help them share that
Well,
story.
yeah. To share the value
Yes.
of what their service or product can do for people. It's not about telling a story about the product,
No.
how great my dishwashing powder is. It is not about that at all. But if you can tell a story about how your product or service has helped another person or improved their life, that is a way to work with story strategically in the business world. It's not about the product, it's about the person. and the journey the person goes on.
Yes, yes, yes. So empowering. I can't. I'm in shock, but like a happy shock, an intrigued shock.
A happy shock.
Yes.
Well, storytelling is like any other skill. The good ones make it look easy. But as we've been
Years of
talking,
preparation.
there are so many skills that need to come together to be a good storyteller. So many. So you got to be strong in a lot of areas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, when I tend to, when I'm seeking guests, I tend to just explore on Instagram. And I saw yours. Your caught my attention the most because you have a fun podcast guest. And I got so intrigued as well. I was like, I'm gonna send you a message. And here we are, and it's been a delight.
Well, I'm so glad you did. I think a conversation should be fun.
Yes, yes. And this
Yeah.
is what I tell people all the time. I try to avoid these lengthy interviews. And if you feel as an interview, I'm definitely not doing my job. It's 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 get that pressure out. Just having a normal conversation and sometimes a almost deep intellectual conversation with somebody,
Mhm.
and talk about life.
Yeah.
Like you had this extraordinary life from opera singers, from the mafia, uh, meeting new and incredible people each and every day. Like you're having the time of your life.
And people are fascinating. They're
Yes,
fascinating.
we are
Yeah,
fascinated creatures.
I think so.
Yes,
Everyone's so different. It's just fascinating to learn what makes someone tick. Uh, yeah, I've always been so interested in that, which is another way that Contessa helped me. You know, everything in my life, it always points back to the Contessa.
yeah.
And like I said, I miss her to this day. I miss her.
Have
So
you
she was
have you ever
such
thought of
a large.
like writing like a memoir for her or telling her story or
I don't know enough about her career
oh
to tell the story like it should be told.
mm,
You know, um, now I have plenty of stories about she and I and how we interfaced, but about her career, there isn't much information around.
especially
So I don't know
at
that much
that
about
time
it.
frame.
Right. Yeah. And, all of her friends have long since passed. You know, she's been gone a long time too. But maybe that was meant to be because I carry on her legacy. I
Yes,
talk about her all the time.
and you carry her well. She should
Well,
be very proud.
thank you for that. I am. I'm proud just to have known her. She was such a big influence on my life. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. I definitely need to get your book. I am I'm stunned. I'm stunned to hear your background. I'm gonna be reading it. I'm gonna be sending you a message to get more deep and depth behind the story. Um
Oh, that's great.
thank you for joining me today. It's been a delight, it's been a pleasure, it's been an honor.
Oh, I have enjoyed it immensely, Dio. Thank you.
Thank you. Um where can the people find you?
Well, they can certainly find me on my website, which is simply fayefulton.com. That's FAYEFULTON.com. And like you mentioned, you found me on Instagram. I post on Instagram daily. I share a lot of information about storytelling. Um, and that is Faye Fulton underscore speaker. That's, and of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. This has been an incredible storytelling podcast with so much life moments that I'm in shock. You're an incredible human being. You're an incredible person. You're an incredible speaker. I am honored to have you here. You have no idea how much you have inspired me in these past 45 and I think an hour. Thank you for
Thank you for saying
sharing.
that.
Thank you for sharing, and we will be in touch.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
You are so welcome, and thank you again.